Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the very first thing of Action Addicts podcast. This is kind of a little bit of an introduction because I didn't want the first episode to be the very first time that you knew anything about this. So I'm going to put this up as its own little thing. It's not a trailer, it's not really the first episode, it's kind of like episode 0. So this is basically just the introduction. Action Addicts Podcast's intention is to be a place where all of the fanatics of action can come together and share their appreciation. My intention is to have a lot of people on the podcast that you will probably know if you follow Action Twitter or you're part of the Action Undisputed Discord server, which I'm the current moderator of, and it is run by very good friends of this show and myself. Mike, Scott, who you will know from the Adkins Undisputed podcast, which has now morphed into the Action for Everyone podcast, and they are a big reason why this podcast exists, because without them I don't think I'd have taken this from something that I was thinking about doing to something that I am now actually doing. At the time of recording this, I have already recorded several episodes, all of which have guests, and it is really giving me pause as to whether or not I actually even bother to do an episode where I'm on my own. As we go forward, I can't guarantee that every single episode will have a guest on, and I definitely cannot guarantee that every episode is going to have a knowledgeable guest on. And what I mean by that is, it is not my intention to always go out of my way to find people that know the subject matter better than I do, as well as I do, or sound very, very intelligent, because trust me, some of the people that are coming on are going to blow what my knowledge is out of the water, and I have been engrossed in this stuff for a very long time. For those of you who are unfamiliar with me, I have been a content creator on YouTube, and I was a streamer over on Twitch and a bunch of other platforms, and I genuinely hadn't planned to leave that world behind because I was having a decent amount of success with it, but unfortunately life gets in the way, and I had to pivot away from games and anime, which is kind of where my niche was cut, and that allowed me to reconnect with my love of action films, which in all honesty had kind of been neglected for a while due to a multitude of things that I'm not going to go into, but let's just say life sucked for a little bit, and realistically there was just no way that I could afford to keep buying films because times were tough. Then the world kind of went a bit crazy, and we had the pandemic, and I think no matter where you are in the world, we can all relate to what that was like. During which time, I ended up reconnecting with the action films because I had a lot of time, and there were so many films that I hadn't watched in a very long time, some of which had been over a decade, and it just reminded me that I used to love these films a whole bunch, and I never really left them behind. I still enjoy a lot of the modern stuff, I still seek out new foreign films, and I did at the time, but it kind of made me want to find other people who enjoy this stuff as much as I did, and I succeeded. I started listening to other people's podcasts, I started following certain groups, and I started to realize that there was a whole community of people out there that could be called Action Twitter, but at the time I was thinking, well, a lot of these people are as addicted to action as I am, and that's kind of when the idea for this podcast began. Now, I want to stress, ladies and gentlemen, that this is not a professional gig. I am very much learning as I go. So some of these early episodes are going to be a little bit all over the place, and I have moments where I will sound like I know what I'm talking about, and I already know there's going to be at least one episode where I sound like I'm struggling to just recall the basics of the English language to myself. I want to get this out of the way right now. I am not a peak perfect human, mentally or physically, and there are going to be times when I sound like I am a complete moron. Partly because I can be, but also because I unfortunately have a few issues that mean that occasionally I suffer from cognitive thought issues, and I can really struggle to put my thoughts into words, and that's just something that I have to live with, and it's something that occasionally is going to be interesting to try and deal with, but luckily I had a very good guest on who was able to kind of take the lead of what I was trying to say and put it into nice words for all of you. So I hope that you guys will enjoy this going forward, and I wanted to just share a little bit about me. As I said, I have always been a huge action fan. I've enjoyed this genre, and I wanted to come on and share it with all of you how much I love it, and try and bring on some people that I also know love it, but also I want to bring on people that maybe don't. and maybe have never even taken the time to watch this thing because they don't understand why we love it. And I want to get their perspective as much as I want to get people who can, talk about framing and blocking and choreography and stunt work and all of that good stuff. But I also want to get people who have no idea what the hell it is that we're all going on about when we say these things, and actually get their opinion on some of the films that we really enjoy, or maybe even just the big films that the mainstream audiences are familiar with. Just what is it about those films that break through for someone that is just a general moviegoer, or maybe even someone that isn't really a moviegoer at all. Another thing that I want to make clear before we go any further, I have not called this a film podcast, even though that's probably what it's going to be categorized as. But because I didn't want to just limit myself to what I can talk about, one thing I'm going to say right off the bat is these first few episodes might feel like I'm taking a shotgun and a very, very broad approach to what the word action film means. I don't particularly care whether or not something is a martial arts kung fu film, whether it is a big bombastic 80s action romp, or whether it's a big Hollywood blockbuster, or, in fairness, one area of film that I might be exploring really for the first time is the joys of Bollywood and the ridiculousness that is their action film cinema. So I will be going everywhere and anywhere, and I do not have a target niche that I'm planning to attack with a scalpel. So if you're interested in a big range of films, then you're probably going to like this. But if you're hoping that I'm really going to hone in on, say, just 80s action films, or just Hong Kong action films, or maybe just stuff that's recent, then you might find there's a few times when you're not going to be interested in the episodes. To where I would say, give the episode a listen. If it's not your thing, it's not your thing, and that's absolutely fine. But I will always try and bring a level of variety and entertainment, because at the end of the day, sticking to just one thing stagnates, and I think immersing yourself in different types of films in different places and talking about them is the way that we can grow and learn and start finding new stuff to enjoy. I certainly am happy to talk about superhero films, but I know that's going to turn a lot of people off, so I will be limiting myself to ones that I either really want to talk about or ones that have a big focus on the action, and you will see what I mean when you see my second episode, because that's going to be on Spider-Man No Way Home, and I'm sure some people will be like, but that's not an action film. And yeah, you could make that argument, but luckily it's my show and I don't have to justify that to anyone but me. So that's kind of how I'm going to roll, and as long as there's action in it and I can justify it and I can talk about it and it's interesting and I think people will like it, I'm going to talk about it. I'm also going to talk about TV shows. I'm also going to talk about short films. Anything that can be described as being action-based, I will likely find a way to talk about it, but don't fret. If there's like one fight scene in the whole film, maybe not, but then there's also a particular film that I've already recorded that everyone in Action Twitter seems to love, and it only has like 2 fights in the whole film. So, it's kind of a case of you just gotta roll with it sometimes. So I hope you guys enjoy what's coming up. I have been in love with this genre since I was a kid, and I was born in 1991, so I know that for some people I'm going to be on the younger side, because a lot of the people that like action films seem to be older than me, but I know that there is a big fan base that was born around my generation, and I know that there are still younger people that are into this, so please, no matter what your age, there's going to be something here for you, and I've got a lot of cool people lined up, and I think everybody's going to have an absolute blast. The one person that I really wanted to have on this podcast as a surprise is someone that you're going to hear mentioned a lot, and that is because it is impossible for me to talk about these films without talking about him, and that is my grandfather, Harry Wiley. He unfortunately passed away pretty much as I was gearing up to start this podcast, and believe me when I say that he knew more about this genre, and he was around to see it start pretty much from day zero, and never lost his love of it, and watched all sorts. He was never someone to just sit and watch the Hollywood stuff. He is the reason that I know so much about the Hong Kong film industry. He's the reason that I grew up watching Jackie Chan, Sammo Hung, Yuen Biao, Jet Li, Bruce Lee to a lesser degree, and he pretty much showed me every major action film, probably ones that he really shouldn't have, given the age I was, but it's pretty much impossible for me to talk about my own experiences without him getting a special mention, and I really, really wanted to get him on, even though I knew it would only be one episode, but unfortunately, that is no longer possible. So, I just want you guys to know that if you hear me mention him a lot, that's why. Him and my dad are the reason why I've seen so many of these films and why I enjoy them so much. So, if you start to think to yourself, wow, this is like the third time he's mentioned his granddad, yeah, get used to that, because that ain't gonna stop anytime soon. If it's something I watched growing up, it's probably something he introduced me to, or I watched it with him. We used to rent films from a place that was literally around the corner from where he lived on a Friday night. We would watch it that Friday. We would take it back on the Saturday. If I was going to stay there another night, we would then rent another film. And you can pretty much always guarantee that the film we rented was an action film of some sort. That was how I found the Rush Hour films, for example. I remember seeing Rush Hour 2 when it released, and it was a rental because at the time I couldn't see the film because I wasn't old enough. But yeah, there's a lot of good memories. There's a lot of cool stories that I think you guys will enjoy, and there's going to be a lot of good films going forward. So I hope you will join me and you'll stick around and you will help me get into the action on the Action Addicts podcast.
Get in the action on the Action Addicts podcast. No greater